Welcome. Welcome to our session on biodiversity and the role of business. I'm Isabelle Grosmaitre. I'm a catalyst of change for positive impact. And I'm the founder and CEO of Goodness & Co., a new type of consultancy platform, serving courageous leaders to shift purpose into practice. So we are all here because we care, right? We care about nature. We care about life. And time is now about action. So before we start, and may I invite our amazing speakers, I'm going to ask you a question. For us to be able to understand where you stand. So we are conscious that time is now, that there is a sense of urgency, and you will know more about the key facts. But how confident are you in our ability, in our collective ability to make the shift happen? In a scale of 1 to 10, please raise your hand if you are above 5. So 5 to 10, so quite confident in our collective ability to make the shift happen. Half and half. You know what? My hope for this session is that I hope that with our amazing speakers, you will have more hope in our collective ability to make it happen. So now, let me welcome the amazing Stefanie Hauer, member of the board of NatureRe, a corporate activist, and a biodiversity enthusiast. Believe me, she leads with conviction, and I'm very honored to have her on stage. Welcome, Stefanie.
Thanks for having me.
Super. So the mic is working.
Yes.
So you define yourself as a biodiversity enthusiast. Yes. Why so?
Why is biodiversity important? Well, biodiversity is life. It is us. It's our life. And I'm very worried because, well, let me ask you a question. You were asking a question. Let me start with another one. How many species do we have on this earth? Who knows that? I don't see one hand up. Okay. Well, the truth is, we don't know and nobody knows. We have given 2 million species a name, but there might be billions out there. We have absolutely no clue how many, and most importantly, we don't know what their role is for the ecosystems. Which means if we kill one species after the other, if we make them go extinct, this is like flying blind. It's like deleting all the data randomly that you can find on your computer without having any clue what that will mean. And we've already lost 70% of the population of all wildlife, and in some cases, insects, for instance, way more, so 95% of certain species. And I wonder, is it 99%, or when are we going to act?
Thank you, Stefanie. So as you can see, I think that you are fully conscious about the challenges ahead of us. Have you always been like that? Did you have a tipping point? What's your journey?
Well, my journey actually started back in 1992. Maybe some of you can remember that was when the Rio Summit, the Earth Summit was, and I was supposed to write a paper on the deforestation in Brazil. So we can all say that back then we knew already about forests and biodiversity. And that's when I started to think about, what can I do? And I ended up in the media industry because I thought educating people would be the right thing to do, and then they would understand how valuable this planet is and what to do. Fast forward, in 2020, early 2020, I was running the biggest magazine publisher in the world, and I had a team in Australia, and they sent a message just saying, we cannot make it into the offices because our continent is on fire. If you remember, that was the worst, those were the bushfires, the worst bushfires in the history of this planet. And that's when I said to myself, I might be doing the things right, but I'm not doing the right things. So I totally, I quit the media industry, and I dedicated myself to the question, how can we run companies without killing our planet?
Thank you. Very impressive engagements. And in this journey, has COP15 changed anything for you?
Well, so far it hasn't changed anything. It's up to us to make that change. It's just words. But the words are already very inspiring, because what they tell us to do is to rethink the business world and to understand that this is not about becoming a little less bad. That's not enough. It's about restoration. It's about being good, actually. I mean, just one example. If you're a student together with friends and you have an apartment, would you make a mess in the kitchen and just leave it that way, or would you clean it up again? And COP15 for me is about cleaning up, about undoing the harm or reducing the harm as well, but mainly about the idea that it's not enough to hope to have the ambition to be the best company in the world, but the best company for the world. And that will only be possible with nature restoration. Reducing emissions will not be enough, and we have to do something with the biodiversity problem, definitely. So we should not always be talking about emissions, but focus actually on biodiversity, because everything we do for the biodiversity situation is always also good for the climate and the water situation.
And a lot of times when we were preparing the session, you told me that it's not about really changing the way we see it. Is not about financing the change, but changing the way finance is operating. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, well, I don't have a financial background, not at all. But I had to learn about it because I think it's going to save our lives. As I said, I was in the media industry for 20 years, and I had to learn the hard way that people just don't want to know. They want to know about Kim Kardashian and her new boyfriend, but if I tell them that we're running out of soil, they just don't care. I saw the data, and it was really heartbreaking. So I figured there must be some other language that people understand. And my conclusion is there's only one language, and that is money. So let's put a price tag on the ecosystem services, make people pay if they harm nature, make people get an award if they do something good for themselves, for nature, for everyone here. That must be the system. So I have been thinking about that a lot.
So tell us a little more about your action at NatureRe. What are you doing?
Well, now I am privileged to be working with wonderful people. I see Daniel, I see Marie-Sophie, lots of others, Sven, hello. So what we do is, this is a NatureRe Capital, that's it called. It's a new company, but we as people, we've been around for a long time, and we have made our conclusions about biodiversity. And we were wondering, how can we get together corporates and the financial industry and nature? What do we have to do to get there? And to have a win-win-win situation for everyone, so that it's even fun for everyone. And NatureRe Capital is an asset manager, so we raise money from institutions, from private people, you, if you want. And with that money, we buy land. I want to stress that because we really believe you have to own land, you have to protect it from everybody else. It must be your land forever, have the permanence. And we buy land which is depleted. We buy that land not anywhere, but if you look at the planet as a whole, you want to start in Colombia. This is where we're starting. Why Colombia? Because Colombia has the fastest growth rate of the trees, and Colombia has the highest intensity of biodiversity in the world. So if you only say 500,000, you want to invest them there because you get the biggest impact for nature as a whole. And the land plots that we buy were depleted due to cattle farming, for instance, but not entirely. Like 20 or 30% are still intact. And we see millions and millions of hectares of land alone in Colombia that are like this. They are idle. If we don't do anything about it, they will just stay that way. But if we do something which we call assisted natural regeneration, we help nature to restore itself. That is the point. So we just take away, say, invasive grasses or the cattle, of course, or chemicals or fences, and then we leave nature to itself because this process has been around for 4 billion years. It works very well. It takes only a couple of years, maybe 3 or 4 years. I've been there. It's just amazing to see how it grows back. And what you have then is an ecosystem service that you can have monetized, because we now have the market for carbon credits. And so we have corporates out there, some of you represent corporates, that are now beginning to understand it's not just enough to reduce emissions, we're not fast enough, we're not getting there, but they contribute, they buy offsetting, and so we take the money from the investors, we give it to nature, so to speak. Nature does the job itself and produces carbon credits for the market, which is working right now and which is of high integrity. And so the corporates can contribute and the investors make a very nice return on their investment. So
Thank you, Stefanie.
It's like a methodology that is also easy to scale because we don't work that much on it. It's not very individual. You can have it at large scale and make
model
and restore nature. That's what we need right now.
Inspiring, thank you. And speaking about corporates, I would love to hear your perspective about which are the corporate that do inspire you in the journey. Maybe they don't have it all right already, but who is on the way, where to look at. You know, we have participants in this room that really are change makers, are eager to make the shift happen. So anything that would help them in this journey that you could share? Oh,
lots of them. I'm really happy to see how they get involved. Let me give you a couple of examples. We're in Paris, so I might mention L'Oréal. L'Oréal is a company, they don't do everything right, but they have worked out a methodology where you consider all the 9 planetary boundaries. So not just climate, not just water, but all of them. I think this is the way to go. And then L'Oréal, to give you a number, they reach out to 4 billion consumers. So with their products, with their commercials, they can really change the world. I mean, that's bigger than any media company in the world. They can really educate people about what to do. Then Siemens Energy, you know Siemens maybe? They are into energy and they have a footprint which is double the amount of the German footprint, the German emissions, if they look at scope 3. So this is, corporate is much more important, a corporate like that, than an individual smaller country, say. Or I was just talking to Behar. Behar is the crop science leader in the world. 1/3 of all the seeds come from this particular company. So if they change the way they create those seeds with genome editing, they can make them more climate resilient. They really have a big impact. And let me give you one last quote, which I loved so much. It's from Microsoft. Microsoft is very ambitious. Not too ambitious, it's just as ambitious as you need to be in this world, because they say they're going to offset or capture from the atmosphere all the emissions they have caused since they were founded back in 1975. And I was talking to this executive of Microsoft, and I said, whoa, I mean, that's quite a commitment. And he said, you know what? We changed the world once. We can change it again.
Very ambitious. Maybe before we go into what does it really take as a leader, because I believe it's all about leadership, and there is no strategy without conviction. That is why we are so eager and so happy to be here together at Change Now, because it's about gathering and joining forces as change makers. What are the obstacles really corporate do face along the way to make the shift happen? Because it brings so much hope when we listen to you on those examples. So what are the obstacles to really unlock this change?
I've thought about this for such a long time. I don't know why people, I mean, we know we must change. We know we can change. There are so many examples. But will we change? I don't see enough change, but I always tell myself, you know, hope is not the conviction that something is going to end well, but the certainty that it makes sense to do it, no matter how it ends. And so we all have to do our best, you know?
This is so true. You know, I always, and this is really my strong conviction, is that I have 5 kids. And I want to say that in 10 years from now, I will be able to look into their eyes and say that I've done everything I could at a time that it really matters.
Yes. And we're not just talking about the next generation, so this will be also our generation's thing. And we're the first generation ever that really understands the emergency, and we're the last generation, in fact, that can do something about it. So please.
So what does it really take as a leader? You have many leaders in the room, wherever they are in the world. You know, we have together today 120 countries that are gathering from around the world with very different roles, you know, in businesses, in NGOs, in academics. What does it take really as a leader to make the shift happen and to move the needle? What do you believe in?
It's the question, what do you feel responsible for? Do I feel responsible for my P&L, or for the building that I'm sitting in, or the entire supply chain? Where does the stuff come from? Actually, we now have some regulation for that, the ban on deforestation, for instance. And then, in the end, the question, where does it go? So go circular as much as you can, and feel inspired by the idea that for the first time, you know, it's not about being less bad, as I said, but how can you leave something behind? I mean, is that too much to ask for, that we go from this world sooner or later and not leave a trail of destruction, but something wonderful? And so you would have to go through the entire supply chain and ask yourself, how can I reduce, of course, the harm, but at the same time do something good? And that's why I believe so much that every individual and every corporate, from now on, this is COP15's expression actually, must become nature positive and must restore and not just hope for the best, so actively restore. I know there are companies that do that, like Chanel or Danone. They are starting to do it, but of course it's not enough. And maybe it's all about ambition. So why are we here? What do you want to be, as you said? Can you answer your children's questions in the end?
Thank you so much, Stefanie. I think it's an invitation for every one of us to join this journey of nature positive. Thank you so much, Stefanie.
Okay, let's do it. So.
I keep the mic. Merci. So now, let me, as we speak, I believe you see the drawing coming up. We have a graphic illustrator that is with us, Fanny Didou. She will be capturing the different elements of the session, and you will see at the very end what she comes out with. So now, let me invite the next speakers on stage, please, because you have still a long way to go before I announce your name, because you're not there yet, or unless you go not the safe way. So let me invite on stage, please, Hubertus Meinecke. Welcome. Please take a seat. From BCG, Marcelo Behar, all the way from Natura &Co, and Laurent, the CEO of and president of Hennessy. Thank you so much. So, you know, something that is very important to my heart is that we have panel that are really men and women. And when I saw this panel, I was not so comfortable. So this is why we have, please, I want to reassure you. So we had a fireside chat with Stefanie, and afterwards you will see an amazing woman leader on another fireside chat. So we are we are all about diversity, and we make sure that this session on biodiversity and business is really diverse. So maybe I'm so happy and so honored to be your moderator today, as you are true inspiration to me. I want to ask you, and maybe Marcelo, I will start with you, as I consider you as a front runner of the world in regards to biodiversity and business. I want to ask you why and how do you do it? So meaning that in this journey, what was your tipping point? Did you engage a long time ago? How did you play around?
Hello, everyone. Good morning. Pleasure to be here. Really, for us, there are many connections between Brazil and France, and ChangeNOW has been an amazing event so far. Just to let you know, I come from NatureRe, which is a Brazilian-based company. Natura was born 50 years ago in Brazil. It was founded by three great men, Luis, Pedro and Guilherme, who attended the first COP, the COP in '92 in Brazil, the Earth Conference, that was the mother of all COPs. And after attending that COP, they decided, well, what if we took biodiversity into everything we do, and we bring the fruits of the Amazon inside our jars? And they started to operate with Amazonian communities, and it has been a journey. We've learned a lot. It's not easy to operate with nature. You have different cycles. You have business cycles and nature cycles. Nature does not respect quarters or early results. It respects its own timing. So it takes weeks on boats to properly source and to engage and to build the connection with communities. And it has been a great journey. What we see is that in order to make the bioeconomy real for us and for others, it's not about only one company doing things. It's about engaging and connecting the dots between science, public policy, private sector, and finance. That's the journey we are. So I think, just to finalize your first question on the tipping point, we are very worried that the Amazon is reaching its tipping point and deforestation was progressing a lot. Reason why we did many public awareness initiatives, like placing a tree counter in front of the Brazilian Congress, so everyone would be aware in real time on how deforestation was progressing. And when we deliver our annual results or our quarterly results, we also deliver how the forest is progressing in its own results. So connecting nature with business.
Very impressive. Laurent, you have been a pioneer actually in biodiversity for such a long time. When we were preparing this session, I was really happy to connect the dots with the work you've done at Guerlain on this. So can you please share with us your story as a leader on biodiversity? Did you have a tipping point? How did you join this movement towards nature positive?
Hello everyone. Thank you, Marcelo, by the way, and for your witnesses. And first of all, for me, I would say it's been 15 years already. And it was a wake-up call. The way I put it is, it was many encounters after encounters. But if I want to recall one name, it's one flower, and one animal.
Tell us more.
The name was Sylvie Behar. And Sylvie Behar has been instrumental within LVMH because she was really the first lady to push everything. And I had a lot of discussion with her back to 2006. The flower was an orchid. Because at the time of Guerlain, we had to find the right orchid for our products. And it brought me to China. When for the first time in my life, I've seen a primary forest. I can tell you that, you don't know what it is until you've been there.
Tell us about it. What is it exactly?
Well, it's just something that you don't know, because we know the forest that had been, developed by man, but everything is special. And you know what? the first thing I remember, it is just beautiful. There's an harmony in that forest that you can, and the sounds and the smells, everything. And the animal is a bee. And the wake-up call was mandatory for us because at the time of Guerlain, it was a simple equation. No bees, no flowers, no fragrance, no Guerlain. So it starts like this one. And because you have to sustain your company, you have to do something about it. So it was the tipping points. But many encounters since then, many encounters. And tipping points after tipping points, encounters, reading. I would like to quote some names, by the way. Because Sylvie Bénard was one of them. Obviously, there was someone else, Joseph Margraf, a biologist, German biologist, who introduced to me this primary forest in China. Was also a person called Thierry Dufresne, a specialist of bees.
So please note down for the one that don't know. I think it's always interesting to understand who has inspired us in our journey, what book we have read, who we have met, which scientists really did this wake-up call, and I think it's very helpful for all of us.
Hey, wake-up call is every day. I see also my friends Gilda Bonnel here. Gilda has been 15 years, waking me, to the discussion about this one. There's also Stéphane Allaire, many Sandrine Sommer is with us. So it's really encounters, and recently, and probably we'll have an occasion to speak about that, recently, the most recent tipping point is Antonio Nobre. Antonio Nobre with Flying Rivers, perhaps we'll discuss that.
Yes, we'll discuss that later. Thank you so much. So, Ubi, please tell us, have you, in this journey, because you are really serving several corporates around the world, so has COP15 been a tipping point in the journey of corporates? Have you seen a change happening?
So first of all, thanks for being here. It's great to be with all of you here. Stefanie, to your question, I think COP15 was a very important moment. Yeah? But I'm a mountaineer, so if I take an analogy, it's a bit like you get somewhere, let's say you get to Chamonix,
Yes.
and then you decide, which mountain do you want to climb, right? That mountain hasn't been decided yet. Yeah? So it's more like the high-level destination, the right to governments to put regulations in place now, but it's really, as Stefanie said before, it's the start of a journey. And if I may compare that to the Paris Agreement was a similar milestone from a carbon perspective. If I then look at what corporates have done after Paris, it was 5-6 years only about commitments. 90% only about commitments. No, and commitments don't help us.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah? And this time we do not have another 6-7 years of time to wait until we move from high-level goals to action.
But you saw companies acting after COP15 really on commitments regarding biodiversity. You've seen that change.
I have seen that, but the share of companies who are on the commitment level have to increase drastically. And the folks who are moving it with action, with implementation plans, with embedded organizational structure is far away from where we need to go. And this time we don't have as much time as it took us for climate, so we need to accelerate.
Thank you. So we can feel the sense of urgency with these amazing leaders that are fully conscious and acting every day. Maybe, Laurent, you can share with us what you do today in this journey at Hennessy, also and it's a learning journey, as it was said. So in this learning journey, what you've done, what gives you hope, what were the obstacles along the way, how did you, shift a little the path forward?
Well, there's a lot to say, so I will focus on one thing. It's obstacles. We have a huge one in crafting cognac in Charente. And that is a quote. I'm using very much that quote because it was a journey with now my friends, Stéphane Allaire, when we took the train to Angoulême and then the car from Angoulême to Cognac. And when we arrived at Cognac, Stéphane looked at me and said, well, you just showed me a desert of wines. A desert of vines. So that's the oxymoron, as we say. That's what is the reality. So we have to do something about this. And to make a long story short, we have two programs. One is called Living Soils, and one is to be called Living Landscape. And they have in common, those two programs, Living Soils and Living Landscape, the trees. And because we know about the trees, carbon, etc., but there's so much more about trees. And it's the home of fauna, it's the home of microorganisms. And I was fascinated by the book of Peter Wolleben, The Hidden Life of Trees, for instance. In the water cycle, so important, so many things about trees. And in fact, the trees will help us both in the soil with agroforestry, and we started the program, super important programs. It's about developing, it's about measuring, obviously, and changing, and landscape. And one of the elements that we're going to develop is called Milpalis. Milpalis is, in fact, 1,000 kilometers of trees and edges with the purpose that we are going to change the landscape of the region. And it's going to look back as it was 50 years or 60 years ago. And it will be a marker of back to biodiversity, to listen to birds again, to create everything which is necessary. So that is one of the major things that we are doing at the moment.
Oh, very impressive, Laurent. And maybe to build on this point, because the main question when we meet CEOs around the world is that we believe, and you are part of them, that there is a way to reconcile impact or positive impact or nature positive impact, even though it's challenging, with economic performance. Can you elaborate on that? How do you see the both coming together?
Well, for all of us, it's about what we can do in our companies or organization. And we do our share, and it's about making more than our share. Because the stake is so huge that we need the same level of response. So there are different ways to do it. As far as Hennessy is concerned, not only we do take care about the hedges, we have a big program also which is beyond business, which is about regenerating the forest of the world, 50,000 hectares in 10 years. So it's just to do our share and more than that. And you mentioned also just before in the former speech the thing about economy. And this is also something that we do take care of it, because you're right to say money matters. So in fact, the two KPIs, even for us, are cash and profit. So once the day we find and it's like also an appel today, the future Nobel Prize of Economy that is able to transform our P&L, including in fact the cost of nature, then we'll be also moving even faster. So that is also the stakes behind, is what we can do for us now, but in a larger scale.
Very clear. The way we look at it and reinvents the way we look at P&L, including nature. Wow. Marcelo, maybe you can share with us also the how you do it. You've been such a pioneer. We are all looking at Natura & Co as the pioneer in the world on embracing biodiversity in its operating model. Can you tell us more about it?
Yes, with pleasure. So I think there is one very practical example. We were working with traditional communities for around 15 years. And one leader of the region said there is a tree that is on the verge of extinction because its wood was to be taken down by the community to produce broomsticks in the rich part of Brazil. And then we said, well, let's see if there are another uses that we would have for the tree instead of its wood. And we, with a lot of science, innovation, we understood that we could use its fruits to produce our products with better performance. And so we would be able to pay 3 times more for half of the tree's fruits than the community would get for the wood of the tree. So immediately the community stopped chopping and start planting. I think that's very symbolic, and that helped to reverse the course of extinction for the Ucuba tree, which is one of the many. So, and we spoke about the diversity that nature has, and we heard about the millions of species. And there is an indigenous saying in Brazil that the Amazon actually has more eyes than leaves, because we have so many millions of insects and different species that we are just beginning to understand the richness of it and how we can we can build an economy that combines both. Because I think the real mystery for meetings like this is how we move away from a perspective where you have economic development in one side and preservation in the other side, into combining both. Of course, it's possible to have sustainable development. We've been doing that, not only in Natura, mankind has been doing that for thousands of years. The Amazon is not a forest. The Amazon is probably the biggest garden on Earth. It has been populated with more than 20 million people for thousands of years. We just have to learn again how to do it on a sustainable way. Reason why it's not only the Amazon, it's everything in the equatorial tropical forests of Africa, Southeast Asia. We need to get back into a model where it's non-predatory, where we take nature into the business model properly with the respect it deserves.
And Marcelo, you've shown in this example, and the various one that I've heard of, is that you are able to demonstrate that you can move the needle, really. How do you scale? Because this is a topic, and the question for all of us is, how do you manage to scale? Because we need to move at the speed that the world needs. So therefore, how do you scale? How do you manage that?
Correct. So I think
And do you? Because it's not so easy.
Yes, I think we do. We had this, what we call the Amazonian board, combining people from our board of directors, but also indigenous leaders, scientists, the workers who are in the region as well. And one of the things that was pointed out by a professor from geography, Berta Becker, she said, listen, why are you just supplying from the Amazon and not aggregating value on the region, rethinking the design of the whole organization? So why only sourcing and not bringing also the oils and aggregating in different ways? So we built something called the Eco Park, which I think is how we are going to scale up possibilities of moving production in the way that it's very north-south into something that is more distributed globally and local sourced and local produced with gains for nature and gains for carbon at the same time.
Congrats. And maybe one last question before we go to Ubi is, it's all about aligning, you know, and you were saying that market cycle and nature cycle don't always align, you know. It's, so what would be, what you're learning on this journey, looking at the fact that it may be challenging at some point or sometimes in life to really realign both on being nature positive and really having true economic performance at the same time. What's your reflection there?
So sustainability has many acronyms. Sorry for bringing some of those along. But I think we have to align what we see nowadays. IPCC, the scientists on carbon, they already did the math. We know where we are on carbon. We produce 32 gigatons of CO2 per year. We know where we are in terms of each one of our countries. We know the NDCs from the Paris Agreement, where we are, where we must be in 5 years. We know, or we should know, where each one of our companies are. We have science-based targets, we have an EBATE curve of emissions, and we should know how our finance relates to risks under TCFD. The set for carbon is done. We have to do the same for nature. Nature doesn't have the same metrics, so we need to build with IPBS, which is an institution that has only 2 years, how the metrics of nature will work. We need to set the same standards, and that's why the COP15 was far beyond just the global framework with generic targets. It was a refresh button for each one of our countries to set what are called the NBSAPs. So the metrics, the national standards for biodiversity. We must get interested in it. We must understand who's doing that, which projects will be in there, and connecting with science-based targets for nature, and finally, the work that I'm part of, the effort on the workforce for TNFD, the Task Force for Nature Financial Disclosure. Once we align the 4 metrics, I think we'll be able to bring carbon credits that will be efficient, that will support projects, that will bring nature back. I think that's the journey.
Bringing nature metrics together. Wow. Ubi, maybe because you see so many companies, and we have heard from you earlier that we're not moving fast enough, or they are moving towards commitments, but very little moving to action. We would love, because it's a session where I would love people to be inspired and to bring hope to this session. I would love to hear from you. Who are the leaders around the world, the corporates, that you believe are moving the needle in this direction?
Happy to share a few examples, and maybe I start with a pattern that I can see for those companies who are leading. I think they have two characteristics. Number one is they have a CEO, a leader, who makes his or her team see what's happening and sees the facts around it. Yeah? So it's a very personal way of looking at what's happening in the world. So therefore your tipping points are important. And to understand what's happening.
And when you say see, sorry for me to understand, and for us to understand, see is that those CEOs, they bring that team in nature, or is it more about, you know?
So I've just recently worked with one CEO who took her whole management team to Greenland for 3 days. They were living one night below a glacier. They were listening to what's happening, and they heard scientists from MIT talking what it actually means. That's what it is.
Powerful.
And she was a big believer. Her team was almost there. And even she said, this trip changed my perspective on the world. So I think to see it time and again, and that's not a one-time thing, to see it time and again and to embrace it together as a team and to live it together for a few days is super important. That's one. Now, strong leaders make people follow. Yeah? And they make them follow in an inspired way. So the second piece is nature cannot be a burden. If you talk as a leader as a burden, oh, we have to do this thing as well, on top of carbon, on top of safety regulations and so forth, that doesn't work. And I've seen that over the past 30 years multiple times. When you think about the 80s and 90s in automotive, European car manufacturers were complaining about quality now being an additional piece to it. The Japanese did it completely different. They said, we jump on it. We change our whole business model, and it will be beneficial because it's lower cost, it's lower inventory, it's happy clients, and it's lower maintenance. I've seen that then personally again in my work that I did in the mining industry. You know, some miners said, fatalities, oh my God, do we really need to go to zero? Others said, of course we need to go to zero. Because not just because it's an important objective, but the underlying processes that allow you to get to zero fatalities is operational efficiency. So it's beneficial from both perspectives. And that we have to do, again, now in nature, to say, you know, what does it mean? I'll give you one example. We work for a leading vaccine producer. Yeah? They have had a 10% cost reduction last year. Now, if you go back and say, okay, now we put another effort on from a nature perspective, they would say, well, how do we do that? And then you say, well, let's think about it. You know, take certain tests. One, for example, is where they needed 4 eggs so far. And the challenge was, how do we move down to 1? And this is nature positive thinking, and it also has a cost reduction element to it. So I think this yin-yang of nature and benefits is something that we all need to embed in it. And it's difficult, you know, because it's not like a one solution serves everything. It's a very deep thinking where you need to get to the metrics, you need to get to the standards, you need to define it yourself so far, even if, you know, we're working a lot with science-based targets with nature together with our Qantas friends. Even if that's developing now. So far, we are more working in a segment where some forward-leaning CEOs who really want to make a positive to the world see the business case on top and move. And that has to change with regulation and potentially also with cost of inaction. I would add that one as well.
Cost of inaction, that's a very good one. And actually, I also believe that yesterday we were at a session on the role of board, and we're talking about those topics, moving from hygiene to thinking about it as a competitive advantage, because companies with a positive impact will thrive, chosen by people, by consumers, by employees, by partners, investors. Nevertheless, can you share with us an example of, so we understand very well the spirits and the mindset of the leader that will drive this change, because it's all about leadership. And nevertheless, is there an example, a business case you can share with us about a company who has been transforming towards being nature positive or is on this journey and the case for it?
Yeah, I mean, all our work is centered around business cases that we do, right? I mean, the easiest one to understand is if you think about regenerative agriculture, right? I mean, there the business case is very obvious, right? That you say, you know, this is nature positive, but at the same time, you know, farmers, you do not have a winning argument with farmers if you just talk about nature positive, you know? They need to feed not just their animals, but also their families. They have cash constraints. So I think with farmers, to me, it was always like a test case almost. You know, do you make them understand? And that business case is actually positive. You know, we've worked with 3 leading global banks who give credit to farmers. And the core was to convince farmers to see that regenerative agriculture actually has a positive business case. So that's very rewarding to see. But it's not just that one, you know, I mean, there's lots of other examples where the business case can be seen, but it needs to be done very specifically. Yeah? Take crop, for example, you know, I mean, if you think about crop in Brazil, you think about deforestation. If you think about crop in the US, you think about, okay, I mean, how do we get down the fertilizer that we use? If you do it in India or in Egypt, you think about maybe we should increase it to make a positive case for lesser land use by doing that. So what I'm saying is the business case is specific, but it can be found.
Sure. Laurent, maybe we move into a topic that is also dear to your heart. It's about leadership, because you are inspired by leaders along their journey. And I would love for you to share with the audience, what does it take as a leader to really move the needle? What is really the skills or the values of a leader to make the shift happen?
Well, perhaps to adapt to the situation, and to be short, I would say anticipation 1, ambition 2nd, and coalition 3rd. So let's explain, because they are connected. In anticipation it's really about understanding, as you say, sensing the case, so learning machine, connecting with everything, and then you can really sense the urgency more than the overall topics. It's coming then the ambition. Again, facing the stakes, we need the level of answer of the same magnitude. So it has to be huge, super big. And coming to the 3rd then, I say coalition because it's beyond just the collective action. We know that even big companies, they don't have means enough to make the change. So that is it, you know, decisive actions with a coalition.
And tell us more about coalition, because you have experienced many types of coalition, many types of collective. Maybe you can share with us your thoughts on this one. What
I can share also to start with is an obstacle. The obstacle in the companies, still also in the sustainable development, is, but can I own the thing? You know, when I came with my project about forest regeneration, obviously it's not only for Hennessy, it's for LVMH, it's for the planet, because I believe it's one of the best tools to solve the issues. And some of them would say, very important people would say, yes, but if you own it, why should I own it? You know, that is something behind. So this is also what we have to overcome. You know, being able to be competitors on the field, because we are in the business. It's like, you know, it's very soon it's going to be Roland Garros, right? So we won't see Nadal. We won't see Federer against Nadal, but those guys on the ground, they're super competitive, but behind they are friends. So that's the point. You know, we have to do something collective, coalition.
Thank you. Moving from a competitive only to a more cooperative agenda. That's not an easy one.
That's not easy one at all, at all.
Maybe Marcelo, a word on leadership, and with your an amazing experience at Natura & Co. What does it really take as a leader, as a front runner also, to move the needle?
I think everyone who's in this room is really privileged, right? We have the privilege to stop on a Friday morning to discuss the possibilities of the world moving ahead. Everyone here is a leader on that space. I had the privilege this week to meet on Wednesday the former president of the Chinese Central Bank. And what they are doing in green finance is amazing. It's important to understand. It already changed the scale of solar energy. It will change the scale on regeneration as well. I think in leadership, for everyone, we have to listen more and to understand the different perspectives that will make climate change being addressable. I think I see sometimes that we are going to a direction where we'll just try to work on the energy transition. We'll move away from fossil fuels into renewables, mostly in the north part of the globe. That won't be enough. So that is my key point. I think if we just make the energy transition, there will be no Paris Agreement because the tropical forests will be taken down, and without the tropical forest, there is no Paris Agreement. On the other hand, if we just work on the tropical forest and we don't make the energy transition, there is no Paris Agreement as well. So we have to work together. In order to work together, we have to listen to each other. I think listening is a leadership skill that has been underestimated.
Life is sure a learning journey, and listening is a critical element into it. Thank you so much. Ubi? Anything that you would like to share based on your amazing experience with all those corporations about what does it take as a leader? You were sharing the example of the CEO, but what you've seen and what does it really take as a leader to make the shift happen in companies?
So I want to build on your points that Laurent, Marcelo have said. On top of what I've heard, what is the objective of a leader? It is to have impact at scale. Right? It's not just to do something, but to scale. The real challenge is scaling. To do a pilot somewhere is not difficult, but to really scale it. And if you want to scale it, you need, on top of what has been shared, you need a organizational home for the topic to live. You need to embed it into your team. So for example, the way we've structured sustainability in BCG is to say, we have nature, food, and agriculture on the same level as decarbonization. That's very important, and I don't see that much in companies.
Thank you.
Once you have that, it's very important that you don't build a huge think tank that sits somewhere in the ivory tower. The strong leaders embed nature by embedding it as a target to their P&L leaders.
So it's all about action, right?
It's all about integrated action. It's not something at the side. It's something, as I said before, on the quality side. You need to embed nature now in everything you do, and there's no question that we have an additional KPI when we look at what we're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the three of you for the amazing panel. Thank you. Merci. Merci. Yes. So now is the time for our last fireside chat. I am very pleased to welcome the lady that will be on stage with me. Why? Because I believe that the most challenging on this journey is to align heads and hearts, right? Not just one day, 1 hour, but every single day and everywhere we are. So I'm very pleased to welcome on stage Nicole Rycroft, the founder and executive director of Canopy. Welcome, Nicole. On the blue one. Yep. Have a So, to tell you the truth, when we talked to one another to prepare the session, I was so amazed by the story of Nicole. So what I'm going to ask before we go into what is Canopy, what we do, how we move the needle in regards to biodiversity at scale in companies, I'm going to ask you the first question, which is, tell us more about your journey. Did you have a tipping point in regards to biodiversity? Have you always been on this journey of biodiversity and business, and how did you get here?
How did I get here? Trains, planes, and automobiles. So I'm from Australia originally, which you'll probably pick up if I have to say anything like market or where is the car parked. And there's something about Australia, the heat that kind of releases the eucalyptus oils in the forests, the smells, the sounds. There's just an intensity to the experience of being in a forest in Australia that wove nature into my fabric at a very early age. And so I always had a love and a fascination. I think many of us as children, like, biodiversity is part of the wonder of life, right? And the curiosity and the awe that we have for animals that we share this planet with is something that I feel has just never left me.
But what is your tipping point? Because it's one thing to be, fully nourished and connected to nature as a kid or as an adult,
Sure.
and one thing to dedicate your life and to go for changing the whole industry on those topics. So did you have a tipping point?
I did indeed. So I was a physiotherapist and an elite level athlete in Australia. And I was headed down a very different trajectory in life. But I always felt very passionate. And then I got a virus that basically knocked out my immune system. And I went from, rowing and training on the state and team and competing at nationals to literally not being able to walk to the corner shop and back. And so there's something about that kind of an experience that just really it sharpens your focus on what's important in life. And so for me, during those kind of what was quite a painful period, it really sharpened my focus around what I wanted to be doing with the energy, my life force and my energy, and how I wanted to be dedicating that to helping to protect our natural world and this fantastic planet that we live on. And so it was after that that I then started traveling, refining kind of my idea and kind of model of change, being inspired by the many incredible organizations and leaders that were out there.
It's very interesting to see that in a lot of times in the journey of life, it's all about courage. Courage is the strength of heart, the fortitudes that manifest in challenging moments of life, right? Where it requires a decision, a choice. And here, in this challenging moment of your life, you have taken your decision to dedicate your life to it. So maybe tell us more about Canopy. I was so amazed to see the scale at which you impact. Tell us more about what is Canopy and what you're doing around the world.
Sure. And to be honest, it's easy to feel very sorry for yourself when you're 26 and a national level athlete and then you get hit by a disease. But it was such a gift to have that moment in time at age 26 rather than me having that at 96. And it set me on a different trajectory. And so I founded Canopy literally at the kitchen table with an $1,800 budget, but with the conviction that we were smarter than mowing down vibrant old growth forest ecosystems to make pizza boxes and T-shirts. And that the chasm that had traditionally existed between the conservation community and the business community was an artificial one, and that whether it was human rights violations or environmental degradation, it was all happening under the kind of umbrella of the global economy, and that there is no reason for our supply and demand worlds to be driving a trail of destruction. And so it was really with that conviction that we were smarter and that we could do better that I started a solutions-driven, not-for-profit organization called Canopy, and we work to protect the world's forests, biodiversity, and climate, and help advance frontline community rights. And we do that by transforming supply chains that are currently driving deforestation and forest degradation.
So when we were preparing the session, I found out that Canopy was working with 750 companies around the world, like Amazon, H&M, Zara, etc. What was the initial tipping point in your case in regards to Canopy? Because I remember very well your preparation. I told my kid right afterwards, oh, I met the lady that did it. So,
right. So we're very well known for greening the Harry Potter book series, which does go down very well with Harry Potter fans, both young and old. And so at that time, it was almost impossible to publish a book on papers that were guaranteed of not originating from a high carbon or biodiverse forest.
How did you convince them?
The publishers of Harry Potter? Well, initially we started working with the Canadian publisher of Harry Potter. And, just because I'm a professional tree hugger, it doesn't mean that I'm the only person that cares about clean water and fresh air, right?
It's true that I believe that transformation is not an easy task, right? It's challenging to shift paradigm. But I always believe that there are people like us in this room that are change makers eager to make the shift happen. So it's easier to start where the enthusiastic leaders are. You don't need to go for the big ones right away, but to find the right entrance to it.
So the CEO of the Canadian publisher of Harry Potter was interested in the idea. And so basically what we did was I found a paper mill that was willing to produce a paper that was completely free of ancient and endangered forest fiber, and basically kind of acted almost like a speed dater between them as a publisher and this mill, helping them to ensure that it hit the right specs. We made an FSC certified Quidditch stick and sent it off to Jo Rowling to sort of engage her in the project. She was incredibly enthusiastic about it, so excited. She wrote a quote very kind of specifically for that edition, the 5th edition of Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. And then from there, she actually reached out to her other publishers globally. But it was really the leadership of Alan McDougall, who was the CEO of Raincoast Books at the time, who said, yes, I am going to commit to the biggest print run that there is in publishing history. I'm going to commit it to an environmental paper to ensure that we can get an economy of scale production of publishing grade papers. And so not only was Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix in Canada printed on environmental paper, it actually triggered this entire kind of revolution in the way that global publishing is done.
Wow.
One individual,
so
one book that led to this kind of broader catalytic.
Finding the courageous leaders that will act as a catalyst of change for the whole industry or the project. Any other example that you could share with us, with all your clients around the world, that could inspire us in this journey to embark on nature positive?
We work with so many remarkable companies, but there's one example that I think is really, supply chains, they don't sound very sexy, but when it comes to stabilizing our climate, supply chains are the hottest ticket on the planet. As most of us will know in this room, 90% of a product's climate footprint and biodiversity footprint is in scope 3, so the raw materials that it is made from. And so transforming supply chains, and particularly kind of the raw materials, is really important. But often we're told that supply chains take decades, long times to change, that you have to be patient. But what we've seen in our work with the fashion industry to shift viscose production out of the world's ancient and endangered forests shows that supply chains can change in real time. So there are 300 million trees that disappear into viscose and rayon textiles every year. It was a largely unknown issue about a decade ago, and we started reaching out to brands to engage them on the issue. And H&M and Intertex approached us and said, okay, we are willing to kind of join you, and we absolutely agree that no single company can change a supply chain by themselves. And we want you to convene us, even though we're fierce competitors in the kind of marketplace. We're willing to step in, but we're willing to step in alongside of our competitor. And so what we did with the Canopy Style Initiative was that we started a leaders working group that was co-founded by ourselves and H&M and Intertex. If we fast forward 8 years, we now have more than 536 fashion brands and designers and retailers that are formally committed to the Canopy Style program. So not sourcing viscose from ancient and endangered forests, really helping catalyze the transition to low carbon, circular, next gen alternatives, and coming together to actually help conserve forest landscapes. That consistent message from that kind of those 530 odd brands, and they represent almost $1 trillion in annual revenues, so a lot of market muscle. That consistent message has led to viscose producers. They represent 90% of global viscose production, developing similar commitments. More than half of global viscose is now verified at low risk of being sourced from an ancient and endangered forest. And we now have 7 commercial producers on market with textiles, viscose textiles that are partially made from discarded clothing that would otherwise be ending up in landfill.
Wow, Nicole, this is so impressive.
Really within a 6-year period, that kind of scale of change. This is a supply chain that is changing in real time, and I think is just a great example of what can happen in any supply chain.
So maybe life is a learning journey, and to share back and to give back to the audience on this, what have you learned into building this cooperation coalition agenda? What were what the biggest obstacles along the way, and how did you manage to make it happen and to shift it?
Well, so I think one of the big things, there's a lot of talk about collaboration. And, collaboration is great, but sometimes, collaboration is all just about talk and not really about action. And so I'm actually a big believer in collective action, where you come together with a collaborative spirit, you come together in a pre-competitive space, but towards very clear and ambitious goals. And so I think that's really important, to be galvanized around audacious, ambitious goals, and then to really lean in and bring all of the kind of vehicles and levers that you have available.
But therefore, how do you do so? Saying that, okay, out of 530 companies that are joining the movement, to make the shift happen, is how do you say you're in or you're not in because you don't really bring capabilities in for action and just you're here to sit? How do you manage that?
So we manage that by having kind of personal, kind of regular check-ins. Like,
okay.
We're a solutions-driven organization, and within the NGO space, people here will be aware that there are carrot and stick organizations.
So what are your carrots?
We're,
your sticks?
we're a pointy carrot organization, right? Like sometimes you need to sort of, be a little pointed, you need to have authentic relationships, right? You have to be able to, as partners, be able to say, you're not actually fulfilling your commitment as part of this initiative.
Have you kicked off companies from the collective?
We have definitely had, let's just say, courageous conversations with partners at different times, and then we have, asked some partners to, we've suspended dialogue until they're at a place where they're more able to engage towards change. So we don't write a press release about it, but,
Very clear. Thank you for sharing. So in this journey, and you've shown that you're able to drive change on a very important scale level. So what does it take as a leader? What is the skill or the value as a leader to make the shift happen and to move the needle and to wake up every day and to say, I'm going to do it, whatever it takes?
I think I was in New York a few years ago. It was just before the pandemic, and one of the servers came up to my table and he had a T-shirt on, and it was during the Donald Trump era, and it was "Be More Heroic." And I was like, that's a really good T-shirt. And I think, to be honest, the leaders that I find most inspiring to be working alongside of, I feel like they have that T-shirt in their wardrobe, and they pull it out every day, and maybe they put a shirt over the top or they put a dress over the top of it. But courage is, I think, a really core quality that we all need to be bringing more to our day jobs and to our daily lives, because we are in remarkable times, really exciting times. Like, what a time to be alive, right? We are the generations that will chart the course of our planet and humanity for the coming decades and centuries. And so for me, it's all about courage and creativity and how we chart a new course, how we work together differently, how we build new supply chains that leave forest standing rather than them ending up kind of in the takeaway containers or the packaging for perfume boxes that we've got.
So we understand from Nicole that if you had a magic wand, you would give courage to every one of us, more courage to every one of us to be able to move the needle. Thank you so much, Nicole. Thank you. So thank you so much for this session on biodiversity and the role of business. I want to end with the question that I asked at the very beginning. Is you've heard amazing leaders that probably have shown also to you that we are the first generation to know what is happening. So we are conscious. I want to see if we have been able to shift your perspective, even though the journey is long, and life is a learning journey for sure on this. But how confident are you in our collective ability to make the shift happen in regards to biodiversity and nature? Please raise your hand if you're confident from 5 to 10, so if you're more confident for us to make the shift happen. It's a 60-ish. I don't know how you say it in English. So we have made very little progress. We have made progress, so I think it's a good way to end this, which is we are making progress. We have highlighted amazing speakers on stage, but there is still a long way to go. So time is now to be more heroic and wish you a lot of progress in this journey. Thank you.